So imagine you're standing on a wooden scaffold. You've got the rough hemp of a noose already draped around your neck. You are literally moments away from being hanged.
Oh, wow. Okay, starting right in the deep end.
Yeah, right in the deep end for you today on this deep dive. But listen, so suddenly the executioner pauses, right? He offers you a full unconditional pardon.
Okay, I'm listening.
But there's one highly specific condition. You have to agree to marry the woman that they have just brought forward into the town square.
Right.
So you look down at her and you notice she has like a slight limp.
A little limp.
Yeah. And you yell back to the executioner, tie the knot, she limps. You literally actively choose death over a slightly imperfect bride.
I mean, it sounds completely absurd to the modern ear, like a joke.
Exactly.
But that is an actual documented historical account. And I think it perfectly encapsulates the strange, profound, and often utterly baffling nature of the human mind that we're exploring today.
It really does. Because we are looking at a man who realized that the objective reality of a situation, I mean, even a literal death sentence, matters far less than the subjective lens through which we view it.
Which is wild to think about.
It is. And that brings us to our mission for you today. We are unpacking a really fascinating stack of excerpts from the essays of Michel de Montaigne. He was a 16th century Renaissance philosopher.
Right. But I think we need to clarify straight away, this is not your typical pristine philosophical textbook.
Oh, definitely not.
Right. Like you don't have a thinker building this massive, flawless architecture of logic and just pointing to it saying, here is the universal truth.
Yeah, no, Montaigne did something, well, totally revolutionary for his time. He basically used his own messy, contradictory, fragile self as the ultimate laboratory.
Exactly. I mean, the word essay itself actually comes from the French word for an attempt or like a trial.
A trial, right.
Yeah, he was essentially just writing down his attempts at living.
Which was a pretty radical departure from the intellectual norms of his era, wasn't it?
Oh, massively. Montaigne didn't write to be a guru. He never claimed to possess absolute answers. He just wanted to examine humanity through raw, unfiltered personal observation.
Just looking at himself.
Yeah, looking at our arrogant assumptions, our frailties, and I think most importantly, the bizarre power of human perception. You have to remember, he lived during a time of massive upheaval.
Right, the Renaissance.
Right, the Renaissance was fundamentally altering how humanity viewed its place in the universe, shifting away from medieval dogmas. And against that huge historical backdrop, Montaigne just turns the philosophical lens completely inward.
So on this deep dive, we're going to guide you through Montaigne's mind-bending conclusions. We'll look at the illusion of fear, the terrifying power of human habit, how we just fundamentally misunderstand education.
That's a huge one.
Oh, yeah. And finally, this incredibly delicate tension he identifies between profound friendship and, well, absolute solitude.
Right. And to really understand Montaigne's inward journey, I think we have to start with how he processes reality. Or, more specifically, how we process suffering.
Yes. Because everything in his framework really hinges on this one core thesis. And he actually borrowed this from an ancient Greek maxim. Basically, it's that humans are tormented not by things themselves, but by the opinions they hold about those things.
Yeah, that is the crux of it all. Montaigne argues that objective reality is, for the most part, totally neutral.
Neutral.
Right. It is the human imagination that acts as this, interpretive filter. It's the mind assigning values like good or evil or terrifying or bearable.
And he applies this directly to our greatest universal fears, right? Things like poverty, disease, and, of course, death.
The big ones.
The big ones. Montaigne suggests that pain and death have no inherent evil quality to them at all. It's our anticipation of them that gives them that terrifying flavor.
Yeah.
I like to use an analogy here. It's like, think of a horror movie. The monster is just a guy in a rubber suit, right? But it's terrifying because of the ominous music and your own anticipation. The mind is doing all the heavy lifting.
Or, to put it another way, it's not the ambient sunlight that burns you. It's the magnifying glass of the mind that focuses all that ambient anxiety into a single scorching point of terror.
Oh, I like that. That's exactly it.
And that is precisely the mechanism Montaigne is describing. He uses some really brilliant historical anecdotes to prove that death itself isn't universally terrifying. It completely depends on the individual's opinion of it.
Like the philosopher on the boat.
Yes, Pyrrho. So he was an ancient philosopher, and he was on a ship during this massive, violent storm. Everyone around him is completely panicking, totally losing their minds with the fear of imminent drowning.
Which is a pretty reasonable reaction, to be fair.
You'd think so. But Pyrrho just points to a pig on the deck.
Wait, a literal pig?
Literal pig. It's just sitting there, completely calm, happily eating its feed, totally ignoring the storm. And Pyrrho uses the pig as the ultimate model for tranquility.
That's amazing, because the pig doesn't have an opinion on the storm. It just, exists in the storm.
Exactly. And the sources we're looking at are just packed with these contrasting reactions to death. We see people making jokes on their way to the gallows.
Oh, yeah, like the guy who was ticklish.
Right. There is a man who specifically asks the executioner not to touch his neck because he's too ticklish, and he's worried he might start laughing inappropriately right before the axe falls.
I mean, the mental fortitude to do that is insane. But you also see, on a larger scale, whole populations willingly embracing death rather than changing their religion or their local laws.
Exactly. And Montaigne's point is that death is the exact same biological event in all these scenarios. The biological cessation of life does not change, but the opinion of the event drastically alters the human experience of it.
And he points out the same mechanism at work with physical pain, doesn't he?
He does. He notes how we feel a surgeon's scalpel far more acutely than we feel 10 sword wounds in the heat of battle.
Right, because you're expecting the scalpel.
Exactly. The physical trauma of the sword is objectively worse, but the psychological context changes the sensation entirely.
He even brings up how people willingly endure immense pain simply for the sake of vanity. Like women in his time literally peeling off their skin to achieve a fresher complexion.
Yeah, or enduring those bone-crushing corsets.
Ugh, the corsets. Which cut so deeply into their flesh it was sometimes fatal.
Right.
But, okay, let me push back a bit here. If the mind is doing all the heavy lifting, if it's really all in our heads, why is it so incredibly difficult for us to just, think our way out of pain or fear?
That's the obvious question, right?
Yeah. Like if I hit my thumb with a hammer, it hurts, regardless of my philosophy.
Well, Montaigne is very careful not to deny physical reality. A hammer to the thumb hurts. A corset physically damages ribs. He's not saying it doesn't.
Right.
What he is highlighting is that our psychological resistance multiplies the baseline physical suffering. It's the anticipation, that clenching against the pain that makes it unbearable.
So fighting it makes it worse.
Exactly. He observes that giving in to fear invites the pain deeper into the psyche. When we tremble, shrink away, and obsess over the impending sensation, the pain actually feels larger because our entire consciousness is consumed by it.
Wow.
But if we stand firm, if we just accept this sensation without layering panic over it, the suffering actually lessens. It's like a military formation, right? If soldiers break ranks and run in panic, they're easily slaughtered.
But if they close ranks and hold their ground, their chances of survival drastically increase.
Precisely.
Okay, so if our minds have this incredible latent power to shape our reality, right? To literally turn a death sentence into a punchline or to modulate our own physical pain, why are we so rarely in control of it? Why do we usually just default to baseline anxiety? I mean, if we follow Montaigne's logic, something must be holding us hostage.
And he identifies exactly what that hostage taker is. It is the overwhelming, totally invisible power of habit. Yeah. We like to think we are rational creatures, making free choices based on logic. But Montaigne argues that most of the time, we are just blindly following the psychological and societal tracks laid down by our customs.
And the text illustrates this with a really famous anecdote about a peasant woman.
Well, this is a great one.
It is. So she started carrying a newborn calf in her arms every single day.
Right.
And as the days and weeks went by, the calf obviously grew. But because the woman carried it every single day without fail, her physical strength and her psychological habituation just grew in tandem with the animal.
Yeah, they adapted together.
Exactly. So eventually, she was literally carrying a full-grown ox around, completely unfazed.
It's just such an elegant metaphor for how habit fundamentally alters human capability. Montaigne actually describes habit as a violent and treacherous schoolmistress.
A treacherous schoolmistress.
Yeah. It sneaks into our lives so gently, so quietly that we don't even notice it taking root. But over time, it solidifies into an absolute tyrant. It completely blinds us to our own potential, and it obscures the reality of natural laws.
And he provides these extreme examples to prove that human nature is not fixed, but rather infinitely malleable.
Right, like the diets.
Yeah, he mentions populations thriving on a diet of spiders or lizards.
Which sounds awful to us.
Right, and he talks about a man born without arms who flawlessly uses his feet to shoot a pistol, thread a needle, and even play cards.
It's incredible.
The implication is just staggering. The body and the mind just remap themselves to whatever they are repeatedly exposed to. But Montaigne takes this observation of neuroplasticity and he applies it outward to society at large.
Yes, this is where it gets really interesting.
He suggests that our local customs totally dictate our morality and our laws. We absorb our specific cultural norms with our mother's milk, and then we have the audacity to mistake those local norms for absolute universal reason.
He uses a very specific, striking image for this, actually. He says human reason is like a dye that colors all our opinions equally.
A die.
Yeah, like clothing dye. We think we are being purely logical, but our logic is pre-dyed by the culture we grew up in. We look at foreign customs and immediately dismiss them as barbaric or illogical, simply because they aren't what our brains have been repeatedly exposed to.
Our baseline for normal is just an ox we've been carrying since childhood.
That's exactly it.
Which is an incredibly relevant critique for anyone listening today. I mean, think about how quickly we normalize completely irrational societal norms.
Oh, for sure.
Millions of people sit in metal boxes in gridlock traffic for 2 hours a day, breathing exhaust fumes just to go sit at a desk and look at a screen. And we largely accept this as the way things are.
Right, because everyone else is doing it.
But if our reason is just a byproduct of our local habits and our laws are essentially arbitrary customs, isn't Montaigne laying the groundwork for total anarchy?
That's a fair question.
Right, because if he recognizes that local laws are essentially arbitrary, shouldn't we systematically dismantle them and build something better?
Well, you would logically assume that to be his conclusion. But this is where Montaigne presents a really crucial paradox. He strongly warns against violently overturning established laws.
Really? Even arbitrary ones?
Yes. And to understand why, you have to look closely at his historical context. Montaigne lived right through the French Wars of Religion.
Okay, so a lot of violence.
Massive violence.
Where-
This wasn't a distant political debate. This was an era of unimaginable bloodshed, massacres, and literally neighbors slaughtering neighbors over theological interpretations and political control.
Wow. So his conservatism here isn't born out of a love for the status quo. It's more like a trauma response to civil war.
Precisely. He believed that the human imagination is simply too unstable and human reason too flawed to safely replace established systems overnight.
That makes sense.
He argues that tearing down the societal house, just because you realize the floor plan is arbitrary, usually ends up with the roof collapsing and crushing everyone inside.
Ouch.
Yeah. Even if a law is absurd-like, populations in his time were being ruled by complex legal codes written in Latin, a language they didn't even speak.
That is absurd.
Right. But Montaigne says the stability that law provides is often more valuable than the chaos that ensues when you try to violently correct it.
Man, that is a deeply pessimistic view of institutional reform. He's essentially saying we are flawed creatures trapped in flawed systems, and trying to force utopian perfection through revolution usually leads to mass graves.
Yeah, it's sobering.
But if society at large is essentially a lost cause of entrenched habits, and we can't safely tear it down, how does an individual ever break the spell? How do we undie our reasoning?
That is the exact problem Montaigne tackles next, and it leads him to his really radical views on education. If you want to raise a human being who isn't just a blind, arrogant slave to custom, you have to educate them in a way that actively disrupts habit rather than reinforcing it.
Which makes sense because Montaigne absolutely despises the educational norms of his era. They were completely focused on empty book learning.
Exactly.
There's this brilliant maxim from the text, knowing by heart is not knowing.
I love that quote.
It's so good. He argues that memorizing information is just putting something in a mental storage unit. It doesn't mean you actually own the knowledge or have any idea how to apply it when the world gets complicated.
Right, and the scholastic system of the 16th century was incredibly rigid. It was all about rote memorization of grammar, logic, rhetoric, and just repeating the texts of ancient masters like Aristotle.
Just parroting things back.
Totally. Students were taught what to think, not how to think. And Montaigne argues that knowledge without deep integration is fundamentally dangerous. Well, it's a double-edged sword. If you just cram a student's head full of disconnected facts, you produce an arrogant pedant who knows the names of all the stars but falls into a ditch because they aren't looking where they're walking. I mean, it's the difference between memorizing the architectural blueprint of a house and actually knowing how to pour a concrete foundation when it's raining and the soil is giving way.
Exactly. For Montaigne, the ultimate textbook is the world itself. He insists that education has to involve travel.
Getting out there.
Yeah, it has to involve mingling with all classes of people, from impoverished shepherds to wealthy kings. The mechanism here is exposure.
Right.
By engaging directly with the sheer contradictory diversity of human behavior, you are literally forced to recognize the flaws and limitations of your own local customs.
Because philosophy, in Montaigne's view, wasn't supposed to be some dry, academic, highly technical subject delayed until adulthood.
Yeah, not all.
He believed philosophy is the practical art of living, and because it's the art of living, it should be taught to children immediately.
And critically, this education wasn't just for the intellect. Montaigne was adamant that the mind and body must be trained together. As he writes, we are not raising a soul or a body, but a man.
And he took that seriously.
Mm.
He wanted kids running, wrestling, and building genuine physical hardiness.
Right, this wasn't just a call for more PE classes.
No, this was about existential stoicism. He wanted children exposed to heat, cold, and physical exertion so they wouldn't become frail adults who were just easily broken by the physical realities of the world.
And he advocated for doing all of this through gentle methods, which was shocking at the time.
Truly shocking.
The schools of his day relied heavily on fear, force, and physical punishment, literally beating Latin conjugations into students.
Yeah, but Montaigne realized that fear only breeds resentment and intellectual timidity. You build true resilience and a genuinely curious character by inspiring engagement, not through terror.
So if we manage to manage our perceptions of fear, and if we break free from our arbitrary habits through this worldly education, we are still left with the ultimate problem. How to navigate the inherent chaos of human existence.
Ah, yes.
And this brings us to a part of Montaigne's thought that is, at once, beautiful and intensely difficult to reconcile. To survive the art of living, he proposes two distinct anchors.
Okay.
One is the ultimate external connection, and the other is absolute internal isolation.
It seems like a glaring paradox, doesn't it?
Completely. He is trying to balance the human need for profound intimacy with the brutal reality of impermanence. Let's look at the connection first.
Sure.
Montaigne reflects extensively on his real-life friendship with a man named Etienne de la Boétie. And the way he describes this bond defies all the normal rules of human relationships.
It really does.
It wasn't a friendship built slowly over years of shared experiences or mutual favors. He claims it instantly seized their wills, causing them to completely lose themselves in one another.
He describes it as a literal fusion of souls.
Wow.
Yeah. In ordinary friendships, Montaigne notes that we maintain boundaries, we hold back parts of ourselves, we protect our private property, our private thoughts.
Right, we calculate the risks of trust.
Exactly. But with Etienne, there was no calculation. There were no boundaries. Their identities effectively merged.
But then the brutal reality of existence intervenes. Etienne falls ill and dies young.
Yeah, it's heartbreaking.
And Montaigne is completely devastated. He writes that the loss left him feeling like his entire life was just a dark night. And it seems that this profound, world-shattering grief triggers the second anchor he proposes for human survival: solitude.
Right. Having experienced the ultimate connection and the ultimate pain of its loss, Montaigne fiercely argues that every person must cultivate a back room of the mind.
A back room of the mind. I love that phrasing.
Or Hinterstübchen, as it's sometimes framed in other translations.
He insists we must not attach our entire happiness to our wealth, to our family, or even to our health.
Right.
We have to learn to be our own company so that if we lose absolutely everything, if the world burns down around us and takes everyone we love with it, we aren't utterly destroyed.
Which is a very tough pill to swallow.
Yeah. This is where the philosophy feels almost unlivable to me. How can he advocate for losing yourself entirely in a friend, fusing your souls together without boundaries, while simultaneously telling you to keep a back room where you are completely detached from everyone?
It feels hypocritical.
It does. If you have a hidden back room, you aren't truly fusing your soul with anyone, are you?
It is the central tension of his life, I think, and perhaps of human life in general. But the back room isn't a bunker where you hide from love to avoid getting hurt.
Okay.
It isn't about emotional withholding.
Mm-hmm.
It is a sanctuary of self-reliance. Montaigne recognizes the peak of human capability, which is true, unconditional love.
Yeah.
He knows it is real because he lived it,
Right.
but he also recognizes the inescapable tragedy of time. Everything we love will eventually be lost to disease, distance, or death.
Yeah.
So the back room is the part of your identity that remains intact when the object of your love is gone. You love deeply, you engage with the world fully, but you retain a core of self-awareness that is completely independent of external circumstances.
Wow.
It is the place you retreat to in order to converse with yourself when the external world descends into chaos.
That reframes it entirely. It's not about loving less. It's about ensuring you have a self left to return to when the loss inevitably comes.
Exactly.
Well, let's zoom out and look at what all of this means for someone listening today. Montaigne emerges from these essays as the absolute pioneer of modern self-reflection.
Without a doubt.
By viewing himself as a fragile, contradictory creature, he freely admits in the text, I am bashful, insolent, chaste, lustful. He completely dismantles the illusion of human arrogance.
He demonstrates that intellectual certainty is almost always a trap set by custom and habit.
Right.
Embracing phrases like perhaps, I don't know, and it seems to me, isn't a sign of intellectual weakness. In a complex world, intellectual humility is the only actual cure for ignorance.
And think about why that matters right now. We live in an era completely defined by information overload and performative certainty.
Totally.
Everyone is shouting their absolute, undeniable truths at us on every screen, 24 hours a day. It just breeds this constant, low-level existential dread.
It really has.
So Montaigne's advice from the 16th century is, honestly, the ultimate shortcut to mental freedom. Examine your own habits. Ask yourself whether your anxieties are based on objective reality or just your subjective opinion of that reality.
Right.
And above all, carve out that back room of the mind, a place where you can sit quietly with yourself, immune to the noise and the demands of the crowd.
It is a lifelong practice, attempting to clear away the dye of our own reasoning. And I think it leaves us with a really important implication to consider.
What's that?
Well, if we actually succeed in building this internal citadel, this back room of the mind where we are entirely self-reliant and detached from the shifting opinions of society,
Yeah.
does that ultimate independence make us perfectly resilient?
Mm-hmm.
Or, by severing our reliance on the world, does it make us fundamentally alone, even in a crowded room?
Man, that is a staggering thought. The line between perfect resilience and total isolation might just be a matter of perception. That is definitely something for you to deeply consider the next time you retreat to your own back room. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the brilliant, entirely human mind of Michel de Montaigne. We will catch you next time.